The brittle quiet of the December morning deepened the moment investigators eased back the frost-stiffened branches beside the wooded edge of Portland's Forest Park, revealing a single, partially buried handbag resting, where the earth had been disturbed by something that did not belong to the natural winter landscape. Its placement, deliberate yet hesitant, carried the unspoken weight of a discovery promising to reshape everything the department had overlooked. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The investigation that would eventually unravel one of Portland's most quietly unsettling cold cases began on a Sunday near the peak of the holiday season in 1982, when families were gathering beneath strings of lights, stores were filled with shoppers seeking gifts, and the city's typical damp winter chill had grown more pronounced. In the early weeks of December, the missing persons report for 22-year-old Emily Larson had initially blended uncomfortably into the background noise of seasonal transients. Many young adults traveled home for the holidays, moved between apartments, picked up seasonal work, or shifted routines without notifying acquaintances. But Emily's disappearance struck a tone that no one close to her could rationalize. She had been reliable, steady, known for her predictable work schedule at a downtown bookstore on SW 10th Avenue, and for her meticulous planning as she prepared graduate school applications. There was nothing in her habits suggesting sudden departure or secrecy. When she failed to return home on December 3rd, her roommates assumed she had stayed late at work. By December 4th, the assumption shifted to concern. By December 5th, concern hardened into alarm, prompting the official report. Portland police began the standard protocol: interviews, background checks, schedule reconstructions, and preliminary canvassing of the streets Emily frequently walked. Her last confirmed location was the store's closing shift, documented in a handwritten time card. From there, she typically walked several blocks south to catch a bus near Pioneer Courthouse Square, an area that, despite holiday traffic, was dimly lit in certain corners and often pooled with rainwater from the season's nearly continuous drizzle. As investigators retraced her path, they found no signs of a struggle, no eyewitness accounts, and no abandoned belongings. Surveillance systems in 1982 were limited. Most stores did not yet rely on closed-circuit cameras, and those that did often stored footage only briefly. Thus, when Emily vanished, the void left behind was profound and difficult to navigate. The absence of digital trails, cell phones, or electronic transactions challenged even the most seasoned detectives, forcing them to depend on human recollection and the slow, methodical assembly of timeline fragments. The holiday season complicated everything. Reports came in from people certain they had seen Emily on buses, in shopping centers, near cafes. Each lead required verification, and each, in turn, dissolved under scrutiny. Investigators grew aware they were racing not only against time but against seasonal chaos, where mistaken identities became common and memories blurred beneath decorations and winter routines. The discovery of the handbag on December 12th began as a simple call placed by a morning jogger who noticed an unusual discoloration in the soil beside a narrow deer trail stretching near N.W. Pittock Drive. Officers responding to the scene recognized immediately the significance of a personal item found in a secluded area during an open missing persons case. The bag, coated in a thin sheen of frost, contained Emily's identification, a small notebook she carried daily, and the holiday shopping list her roommates later confirmed she had drafted. For investigators, the presence of these items shifted the case from a disappearance to a probable criminal investigation. The carefully placed bag suggested intentional concealment rather than accidental loss. The medical examiner's team was summoned to examine the site, though no physical remains were discovered at that initial location. Patterns in the soil indicated a disturbance inconsistent with animal activity, and the trajectory of trampled foliage indicated human passage. The proximity to the road suggested the bag had been discarded by someone who understood the terrain well enough to assume the winter vegetation would obscure it. This early forensic impression led detectives to consider the possibility that the person responsible had local familiarity, reducing the likelihood of transient involvement. As December advanced, the Pacific Northwest's persistent rain added its own complications, washing away impressions, softening soil, and obscuring potential trace evidence. Detectives photographed every angle, collected soil samples, and extracted fibers found near the bag's zipper. However, in 1982, fiber comparison methods lacked the computational precision later generations would rely on. Analysis required extensive manual review. The backlog of cases typically slowed the process further, yet the approaching holidays reduced staffing in several forensic departments, adding delays investigators could ill afford. The community responded with a mixture of concern and resignation. Portland's population, while accustomed to winter difficulties, had grown wary of the rising number of missing persons in the previous decade. Posters featuring Emily's photograph were distributed around bus stops, grocery stores, and university buildings, blending among holiday flyers advertising church services and seasonal concerts. Local newspapers dedicated short sections to updates, though coverage remained moderate, overshadowed by holiday events and year-end political developments. The search area around Forest Park expanded steadily, guided by teams equipped with metal detectors, cadaver dogs, and grid mapping tools. Despite holiday obligations, volunteers joined law enforcement in combing through the dense, rain-slicked terrain. By December 20th, the effort had widened to dozens of acres, stretching from the park's edge down toward the twisting streets of residential Northwest Portland. For investigators, the clock counting down to Christmas felt symbolic of the accelerating urgency. Each passing day without clarity intensified the pressure weighing upon the detectives assigned to the case. Among the investigative staff was a forensic sketch artist named Daniel Whitaker, a quiet, observant man known for his ability to translate faint recollections into detailed composite images. Though sketch artists were typically involved after witness statements had produced enough descriptive content, Daniel had been assigned a parallel task by his supervisor: to regularly review all incoming witness leads, even those lacking concrete descriptions, and to maintain a running log of potential recurring features mentioned by citizens who believed they had seen Emily or someone associated with her disappearance. His role would eventually prove pivotal, though at the time, he viewed his contributions as minor compared to the field investigators conducting daily searches. On December 22nd, a second significant development emerged when a maintenance worker at a small Christmas tree lot near N.W. Lovejoy Street reported finding a single glove wedged between two stacked pallets. The glove, soaked from rain and partially stained with mud, matched the pair Emily's family confirmed she had worn. Its location suggested it may have been removed or dropped hastily, possibly during transit. Detectives examining the glove noted faint traces of particulate matter that differed from the soil found near the handbag. These incongruities hinted that Emily may have been moved through multiple locations before the bag was discarded. Laboratory specialists began comparing the particles to soil databases maintained across the region, though results would not emerge until well into the next year. Christmas approached without resolution. Portland streets filled with lights, wreaths, and seasonal displays, creating a surreal contrast against the gravity of the case. Detectives continued reviewing reports from individuals claiming to have noticed unusual behavior in vehicles parked near the trail or around Pioneer Courthouse Square. One witness referenced a man seen in a beige sedan near Emily's bus stop on the night she vanished. The description was vague, consisting only of general impressions: approximate age, dark hair, and a facial expression the witness described as nervous. No details regarding height or build were provided. Detectives debated the usefulness of such vague recollections, but they noted them regardless. Daniel Whitaker, reviewing the accounts, made a habit of sketching quick approximations, not full composites but faint structural outlines based on the minimal information available. His pages filled with abstract impressions, none concrete enough to justify release to the public. Still, he compiled them carefully, creating what he referred to in his notes as a pattern archive. New Year's Eve came and went with the case still stagnant. Search operations reduced temporarily as winter storms swept across the Pacific Northwest, flooding side roads and limiting access to several trails. The city, transitioning into 1983, attempted to resume normalcy. Emily's family held a quiet vigil, attended by friends, former classmates, and bookstore colleagues. Detectives who had grown increasingly invested in the investigation attended unofficially, watching from a respectful distance. When the ceremony ended, they returned to their offices, surrounded by stacks of files, plaster casts of footprints, and soil samples awaiting transfer. January continued with few leads. Investigators persisted with interviews, repeating questions in hopes of eliciting forgotten details. No suspect emerged. No clear motive formed. Amid rising pressure, the department remained committed to procedural rigor. Patrol officers revisited bus routes, store employees were questioned again, and forest search grids extended deeper into remote areas. By early February, morale dipped noticeably. The holiday season, which had begun with optimism, had ended without closure, and the city's attention moved to other matters. For many, Emily's name became a reminder of how easily a person could slip from the busy rhythm of winter life into the silence of the unknown. Yet beneath the surface of fatigue, a single overlooked detail waited to emerge. One that would eventually draw the sketch artist into the center of a revelation capable of unspooling months of confusion. And in the quiet of his workspace, sheltered from rain tapping against basement windows, Daniel continued refining the faint features witnessed only vaguely by those who had crossed paths with a stranger on an ordinary December night. As February deepened into a season of cold rain and short, muted days, the investigators found themselves returning repeatedly to the evidence logs, searching for any overlooked connection that might bridge the widening gap between Emily's last known movements and the scattered items recovered across the city. Despite the extensive field work, interviews, and forensic collection, the narrative remained frustratingly incomplete. The handbag near Forest Park and the glove discovered beside the Christmas tree lot stood as the only physical markers along a path that seemed to dissolve into uncertainty. While detectives revisited familiar routes, one department employee took a different approach, rearranging the evidence not physically, but visually, assembling impressions and fragments into a structure that would eventually yield clarity. Daniel Whitaker spent increasing amounts of time in the basement office that housed the sketch archives. Portland's police department, during the early 1980s, relied heavily on paper records and manual filing systems, and the walls surrounding Daniel were lined with cabinets containing composite drawings for cases stretching back decades. He believed that even in the absence of strong witness statements, there were still visual threads that could be teased out through careful assessment of minor details. The impressions provided by the witness near Pioneer Courthouse Square, combined with vague recollections from several commuters who believed they had seen a man packing near a beige sedan on December 3rd, were too soft to yield a definitive drawing. Yet Daniel found himself returning repeatedly to those notes, sketching faint shapes not intended for circulation, but for personal analysis. He began compiling descriptions into a categorized matrix, noting commonalities in perceived age range, facial demeanor, and posture. Although these characteristics were subjective, Daniel's method relied on the belief that patterns often emerged not from clarity but from recurrence. Detectives working the case appreciated his quiet persistence, but few expected significant developments to arise from his efforts. Still, Daniel continued, documenting the subtleties embedded within the scattered accounts that drifted through the department. By mid-February, the forensic team examining the soil collected from the handbag and glove completed a preliminary analysis. The soil near Forest Park contained high concentrations of basaltic fragments typical of the region's upland trails. The particulate matter embedded in the glove, however, had characteristics pointing to a different environment. Specifically, industrial zones where older warehouses stood on land that had undergone grading and resurfacing multiple times. This divergence reinforced investigators' suspicion that Emily may have been transported to more than one location. While the soil comparisons did not narrow the suspect pool, they provided an expanded geographic framework, prompting detectives to consider areas closer to industrial districts along the Willamette River. The police department began reviewing missing persons cases with similar geographic inconsistencies. None matched Emily's profile, but the exercise underscored the importance of examining the broader context of environmental clues. Detectives familiar with Portland's shifting winter terrain noted that industrial areas often accumulated mud and particulate matter that could cling to tires or footwear, later transferring to personal items if handled or discarded abruptly. During this period, a small article in the local press revisited the case. It summarized the timeline succinctly, emphasizing the absence of progress and the emotional toll the disappearance continued to have on Emily's family. The renewed media attention generated a small influx of calls from residents who believed they recalled fragments of potential relevance: an unfamiliar vehicle parked in a side alley, an individual lingering near a bus shelter, a distant figure moving through the wooded perimeter near N.W. Pittock Drive. Most accounts contradicted one another or lacked detail, but a few contained overlapping elements. Daniel, reviewing these, added new notations to his growing visual archive. One particular call came from an elderly man who reported seeing a sedan parked near a warehouse entrance on the night of December 3rd. He could not recall the precise make or model, but he remembered the unusual dullness of its paint, suggesting age or poor maintenance. He also noted that the driver appeared to be waiting for someone, though he could not see any passenger. While this account did not directly connect to Emily, detectives logged the information, recognizing the importance of small contextual details. Throughout late February and early March, the investigation maintained a steady but slow pace. The city, still damp from persistent winter rain, showed signs of early spring as temperatures fluctuated. The forest search teams, now familiar with the terrain, continued sporadic sweeps, though these yielded no new discoveries. The case file expanded to several hundred pages, with entries documenting every call, lead, and sample. Then in early March, a breakthrough emerged, not from field evidence but from Daniel's analytical sketches. While reviewing the assorted impressions he had compiled, he began noticing a consistent feature mentioned across 6 of the vague witness notes: a slight asymmetry in the man's eyes, described variously as a narrowed left eyelid, a droop, or a half-blink expression. Individually, These observations seemed insignificant, yet their repetition across multiple accounts suggested that witnesses were recalling the same person. Daniel emphasized this feature in his sketches, refining the contours into a form that appeared increasingly distinctive. He presented his findings to the lead detective, who agreed that the recurring description warranted further exploration. The department authorized Daniel to create a full composite drawing incorporating the consistent elements: the approximate age range, the dark hair, the neutral expression, and most importantly, the subtle asymmetry around the left eye. Once completed, the composite was circulated internally and paired with vehicle descriptions referencing an older beige sedan. Within days, officers began comparing the drawing to offenders listed in the department's older arrest logs, many of which contained mugshots taken under varying lighting conditions. While composite matching was imprecise, several names surfaced as potential parallels. The majority were discounted quickly, but one file stood out: a man arrested 12 years earlier for trespassing near a college campus. His booking photo displayed a faint asymmetry in the left eyelid consistent with Daniel's composite. The man, identified as Ronald Hale, had no significant criminal record beyond that incident and a few minor traffic violations. However, his appearance and the type of vehicle he once owned, a beige sedan reported sold several years earlier, placed him within a potential sphere of interest. Detectives began discreet background research on Hale, finding that he had lived intermittently in Portland since the 1970s. Employment records showed sporadic work in shipping yards along the Willamette River, aligning him with the industrial zones implicated by the soil analysis. His last known address was a small apartment complex located several miles from Forest Park and within walking distance of multiple bus routes. The proximity raised questions. Could Hale have observed Emily regularly without drawing attention? Did he frequent the downtown bus corridor near Pioneer Courthouse Square? These possibilities merited further inquiry. Officers initiated informal surveillance, documenting his movements and habits. Hale lived alone, maintained irregular hours, and often took long solitary drives late at night. He did not match the profile of a violent offender, yet investigators recognized that profiles were not definitive predictors of behavior. Meanwhile, detectives attempted to locate the beige sedan through vehicle registration databases, though the paperwork indicating its sale years earlier yielded no immediate trail. As surveillance continued, the department expanded its interviews, reaching out to former coworkers and neighbors. Many described Hale as quiet, detached, or indifferent, though none suggested overtly threatening behavior. His life seemed defined by routine rather than volatility. This lack of distinct behavior made the investigation challenging. There was no overt sign linking him to Emily, but the consistent alignment of circumstantial features kept him within the investigative lens. By late March, the detectives reached a crossroads. Without physical evidence directly connecting Hale to Emily's disappearance, pursuing a warrant became difficult. The department faced mounting pressure to advance the case responsibly without infringing on civil liberties. Investigators considered suspending active surveillance until new evidence emerged. Then, unexpectedly, new information surfaced through a tip from a seasonal employee who had worked near the Christmas tree lot in December. While reviewing old newspaper coverage, she realized she had seen a man near the pallets around the time Emily disappeared. She had assumed he was part of a delivery crew, but remembered he lingered after business hours. When shown Daniel's composite drawing, she hesitated, then indicated that the resemblance was notable, particularly the asymmetrical eye. Detectives documented the interview and factored her statement into their growing assessment. While not definitive, it added weight to the emerging pattern. The composite, once merely an interpretive tool, now served as a connective thread, uniting disparate observations from different corners of the investigation. As April approached, the persistent rainfall began to ease, and Portland transitioned into its slow, early spring. Investigators returned to the industrial zones along the river, searching for areas where soil consistent with the glove particulate might be found. Their intention was to identify locations where Emily or her belongings may have been placed temporarily before being relocated. These searches, once again, yielded no direct evidence, but they provided a deeper understanding of the terrain, a knowledge that would become important later. Meanwhile, Daniel remained quietly committed to refining his composite techniques. His role remained largely unheralded, but his attention to the subtle patterns within witness accounts anchored a growing investigative theory. If the man described across multiple sightings was indeed Hale, then more connections would eventually surface. If he was not, the composite might still guide the department toward another individual sharing the same distinctive features. The investigation continued with measured persistence, grounded in methodical review, procedural care, and a refusal to abandon the faint signals emerging across the landscape of incomplete recollection. And as spring deepened, the first tangible link between the sketch and physical evidence waited just beyond the periphery, ready to shift the case toward the path investigators had long sought but could not yet fully see. By early May, the investigation had settled into a cautious rhythm marked by long stretches of administrative work punctuated by subtle developments requiring careful consideration. Though months had passed since Emily Larson's disappearance, the case remained active, sustained by the detectives' unwavering commitment and the slow accumulation of circumstantial threads that continued pointing toward a figure who had not yet been definitively placed within the sequence of events. While the detectives combed through evidence, the broader community, preparing for warmer weather and transitioning into spring routines, felt the lingering unease of a case unresolved. Posters faded under rain and sun, corners curling, fragments peeling and drifting across sidewalks as reminders of the unanswered questions hanging over the city. Inside the police department, the composite sketch created by Daniel Whitaker occupied a modest but persistent presence. It hung on the bulletin board beside the case timeline, and a city map marked with pins identifying key locations, a quiet guardian of a narrative still waiting for closure. Though composites lacked the precision to serve as standalone evidence, their power lay in their ability to unify recollections. Each time officers passed the sketch, they revisited the delicate balance of probability and possibility, reassessing assumptions and wondering whether the face staring back from the paper was merely an echo of incomplete memories or the accurate representation of someone still living among them. The gradual expansion of background checks on individuals with historical ties to beige sedans revealed little. Many vehicles from that era had been sold, scrapped, or relocated without record, complicating efforts to trace ownership. Nonetheless, detectives remained attentive to any minor detail that could link a vehicle to a location tied to the case. When a new report surfaced regarding an abandoned lot near an old warehouse in northwest Portland, officers visited the area, hoping to uncover discarded metal fragments, tire tracks preserved in hardened mud, or remnants of vehicle parts. Instead, they found only erosion, broken pallets, and the lingering smell of diesel that permeated the air around industrial corridors. The investigation's gradual shift toward environmental reconstruction became a defining characteristic of the mid-year phase. Detectives began reviewing floodplain maps, drainage patterns, and the placement of industrial runoff channels, searching for any plausible route connecting the particulate sample on Emily's glove to specific stretches of land. Though speculative, the work deepened understanding of the geographical interplay surrounding the case and gradually narrowed potential locations where Emily might have been held or transported prior to her belongings being dispersed. During this time, Daniel's role evolved from passive archivist to analytical contributor. He began cross-referencing the composite sketch with archived mugshots from neighboring counties, documenting similarities in facial asymmetry. While most comparisons were quickly ruled out, the process strengthened Daniel's conviction that the recurring feature was not random, but instead a reliable identifying marker. He continued shading the contours of the face in his sketchbook, refining the posture and implied demeanor described by the witnesses, a form of visual reasoning that allowed him to maintain focus as the broader inquiry stretched into its 6th month. Detectives occasionally visited Daniel's office to consult on eyewitness accounts, particularly when new sightings emerged that hinted at a figure lingering near transit centers or trails. Although none provided decisive breakthroughs, Daniel noted that the composite remained consistent with the general type described across these reports. That consistency reinforced the possibility that the man seen packing near Pioneer Courthouse Square, lingering near the Christmas tree lot, or waiting beside the beige sedan shared a common identity. By late May, the investigation appeared to be circling familiar terrain. Detectives conducted renewed interviews with individuals who had been present in the downtown area during the early days of December, seeking to extract memories that might have sharpened over time or gained clarity with distance. Most interviewees recalled little beyond atmospheric details: the dampness of the air, the glow of seasonal displays, the rush of holiday shoppers. Yet in rare instances, small fragments emerged. A man standing near a bus stop looking in the direction of the square, the faint outline of a car idling near a curb, or a figure carrying something indistinct through the shadows of early evening. Such recollections lacked specificity, but contributed to a growing impression of movement patterns associated with the unidentified subject. In early June, a development emerged as the weather warmed and hikers returned to the outskirts of Forest Park. A group following a trail near the location where Emily's handbag had been found discovered a thin, partially decomposed scrap of textile tangled in underbrush. Officers collected the fabric, which appeared consistent with the lining of a coat. Laboratory testing revealed fibers matching the type found on Emily's winter jacket, one she had been known to wear on cold December nights. The discovery did not yield fingerprints or distinctive marks, but it served as a confirmation that the vicinity around Forest Park held more relevance than previously perceived. That small scrap reinforced the belief that Emily had been near that area during the period following her disappearance. With renewed focus on Forest Park, detectives conducted deeper sweeps of remote sections, paying close attention to areas previously overlooked due to winter conditions or challenging terrain. They examined ridge lines, ravines, and runoff channels for indications of disturbance. Soil impressions from early winter rain had long since eroded, but by assessing the density and composition of ground cover, investigators determined which areas had likely been traversed in colder months. This environmental approach gradually refined the map of possible pathways. Though still broad, the territory now concentrated around several key access points. One such access point, an unmarked pull-off only visible to those familiar with the steep road near N.W. Cornell, caught the attention of detectives. The area provided a discreet stopping place for a vehicle, offering partial concealment from passing traffic. Officers examined the ground, finding small flecks of degraded rubber and granular soil matching a mixture similar to the particulate previously analyzed on the glove. Though the sample was too degraded to offer definitive certainty, it strengthened the case for this site being part of the sequence of events. As field teams expanded their searches around the pull-off, attention returned to Daniel's composite. Detectives wondered whether someone accustomed to navigating the twisting, forested roads of northwest Portland, someone who preferred privacy and possessed a vehicle capable of traversing wet terrain, could have been responsible. Ronald Hale remained a person of interest not because of concrete evidence, but due to the repeated alignment of minor details surrounding his history, habits, and geographic familiarity. In mid-June, the detectives chose to revisit the industrial district associated with Hale's past employment. The declining shipping yards, marked by corrugated metal siding and fatting signage, formed a labyrinth of forgotten corners where someone could have lingered unnoticed. Officers walked through abandoned storage sheds, inspected fenced-in loading zones, and studied the trenches carved by decades of runoff. While the search produced no direct evidence, one officer noted that the soil composition closely matched the earlier glove sample. As investigations continued, detectives sought access to employment records from Hale's former workplaces. Many archives had been discarded or damaged over time, yet one warehouse maintained a partial log of staff schedules. The records revealed that Hale had worked late shifts during the week of Emily's disappearance. Though this did not establish wrongdoing, it positioned him within an environment linked through forensic evidence to the case. Detectives compared this timeline with known bus schedules, street maps, and routes commonly used by workers commuting between northwest Portland and the industrial riverfront. Their analysis suggested that Hale could have traveled through the downtown area at approximately the same time Emily ended her shift. By July, the case resumed a steady momentum driven by incremental discoveries rather than dramatic revelations. Detectives refined their geographic modeling, combining soil data, witness statements, and Hale's historical movement patterns. They scrutinized every new report of a suspicious individual matching the composite, even those occurring outside the city center. Each adjustment to the timeline sharpened the investigative focus, gradually narrowing the window of activity on the night Emily vanished. With these refinements, detectives proposed a reconstructed scenario. A person familiar with both Forest Park and the industrial zones could have approached Emily near her bus stop, possibly offering transportation or waiting until she moved toward a darker stretch of sidewalk. The subsequent movement of her belongings suggested deliberate staging, intended to disperse evidence across different environments. Yet without direct physical linkage between Hale and any item associated with Emily, the theory remained speculative. Throughout these developments, Daniel continued his quiet, persistent efforts. His composite sketch, once a tentative assembly of loosely connected hints, had transformed into a symbol of investigative direction. Officers from unrelated units occasionally paused to study it, remarking on the distinctive facial asymmetry and the neutral, unsmiling expression. Though subtle, these elements carried an unsettling ambiguity that seemed to follow the viewer, mirroring the uncertainty surrounding the case. Summer progressed with growing public interest. Media outlets revisited the case, highlighting the emergence of the composite and the ongoing search efforts. Community members renewed their vigilance, reporting any individuals resembling the sketch. Most reports led nowhere, but the volume of calls indicated the composite's increasing influence. In early August, momentum shifted when a local mechanic contacted the department after seeing a story about the case. He recalled servicing a beige sedan around 1981 with front-end body damage and an uneven suspension. The driver, whose description loosely matched the composite, had seemed evasive when discussing the repairs. The mechanic could not provide a name, but he believed the car might still be in use, possibly exhibiting similar mechanical wear. Detectives followed the lead, searching for older sedans matching the profile. Though results were initially inconclusive, this detail, paired with the man's approximate appearance, added weight to the growing network of circumstantial evidence. Yet the critical breakthrough still lay ahead, hinging on the convergence of Daniel's patience, the department's procedural discipline, and a fragment of overlooked documentation waiting to surface within the vast expanse of archived files. A document that would soon bring the investigation into its final phase and redefine the role of the sketch artist whose work had silently guided the search for months. The decisive turn arrived not with a new witness or field discovery, but through a routine archival review prompted by a department initiative to reorganize older files. In mid-August, clerks tasked with sorting decades of stored paperwork uncovered a traffic incident report from late 1981 that mentioned a beige sedan involved in a minor collision near a warehouse district entrance. The vehicle had been stopped for a faulty headlight, and the driver, identified as Ronald Hale, had received a citation. Although seemingly insignificant, the report included a detailed location map and officer notes on the driver's demeanor, referencing a slight asymmetry in Hale's left eye. The discovery aligned precisely with the distinctive feature emphasized in Daniel's composite, validating months of circumstantial pattern recognition. Detectives re-examined the incident's location. The warehouse district entrance marked on the map overlapped with areas where soil samples matched the particulate found on Emily's glove. Additionally, the report indicated Hale had been familiar with that specific warehouse corridor long before Emily disappeared. This reinforced the likelihood that he possessed intimate knowledge of both the industrial environment and the roadways connecting it to Forest Park. The emerging alignment between the composite's defining feature, Hale's historical presence in relevant locations, and the geographic distribution of evidence marked a substantial progression from speculation toward actionable suspicion. With this reinforcement, investigators prepared a structured re-interview strategy, contacting individuals who had worked with or lived near Hale during the early 1980s. Several former coworkers recalled his tendency to take solitary late-night drives, often without explanation. Others remembered that he occasionally parked in wooded areas near his apartment complex, which bordered a network of narrow roads extending toward Forest Park. Although none of these statements constituted direct evidence, they painted a portrait of a man whose habits aligned uncomfortably well with the developing timeline. Detectives also cross-referenced Hale's known addresses with transit routes used by Emily. They discovered that one of Hale's apartment buildings had been located only a few blocks from the bus line she used regularly. This suggested a plausible opportunity for Hale to have observed her without drawing attention. The department took note of this proximity, adding it to a growing portfolio of converging details. In early September, detectives conducted a formal interview with Hale, approaching him under the pretext of reviewing old traffic documentation. They asked generalized questions about his whereabouts in early December 1982, whether he recalled being near the downtown bus corridor, and whether he still owned or had access to the beige sedan referenced in the past report. Hale answered within the boundaries of politeness, but displayed noticeable discomfort when asked to clarify his movements on the night Emily disappeared. Though the interview generated no confession or direct inconsistency, detectives observed his increasing agitation when shown the composite sketch. Hale remarked that it bore little resemblance to him, yet the slight tightening around his left eye, mirroring the trait that had guided the investigation, did not go unnoticed. Following the interview, investigators pursued court approval for broader access to Hale's historical property records, storage rentals, and employment schedules. The request was granted based on the documented alignment of multiple investigative factors. Upon reviewing the materials, detectives discovered that Hale had rented a small storage unit for several months in early 1983, then abruptly terminated the lease. The facility, located near the industrial corridor associated with the soil analysis, had originally maintained records of unit contents in cases of abandonment. Though Hale had emptied his unit before terminating the agreement, one document described a sealed plastic container left behind temporarily during move-out. No immediate link to Emily was established, but this discovery raised additional concerns. To supplement these findings, the department authorized a renewed forensic assessment of the composite sketch. While sketches could not serve as proof, investigators aimed to quantify its alignment with Hale's facial measurements. Photographic analysts compared Daniel's composite with Hale's archived images, identifying a statistically notable correspondence in the relative height of the eyes, the slope of the brow, and the narrowness of the jawline. Though not definitive evidence, the analysis strengthened the argument that Daniel's interpretation of witness recollections had been both accurate and critical. By late September, investigators felt justified in petitioning for a search warrant targeting Hale's residence and vehicle. The affidavit emphasized the accumulated circumstantial evidence, the alignment with the composite, and the geographic pattern reconstructed from forensic analysis. The judge approved the warrant, allowing investigators to conduct a coordinated search. On the morning of October 2nd, detectives executed the warrant. Hale cooperated, maintaining that he had nothing to hide. His residence appeared orderly, with no overt indications of criminal activity. However, during the search of his garage, officers discovered a locked toolbox containing several items that warranted closer scrutiny. Fragments of soil samples consistent with the industrial particulate previously documented, a torn section of textile resembling the lining found near Forest Park, and a map of northwest Portland with several routes highlighted. Routes consistent with the suspected path used to transport Emily's belongings. The items were collected for analysis. None were inherently incriminating, but their contextual relevance was considerable. While laboratory examinations proceeded, detectives conducted a detailed review of Hale's employment timeline. They identified a critical gap. On the night of December 3rd, Hale had not clocked in for his usual shift and had instead signed out early for unspecified reasons. This discrepancy, absent from earlier notes, added weight to the theory that Hale had been free to move through the city during the window when Emily disappeared. Additional breakthroughs followed. Enhanced testing of the textile fragment found months earlier in Forest Park revealed microscopic traces of synthetic insulation, consistent with the manufacturing specifications of the jacket Emily was known to wear. When compared with fibers recovered from Hale's toolbox, analysts found a match. This discovery established the first physical link between Hale and evidence associated with Emily. Armed with these results, detectives built a comprehensive case narrative anchored in geographic reconstruction, forensic convergence, behavioral analysis, and physical evidence. By mid-October, they obtained a warrant for Hale's arrest on charges related to Emily's death. The arrest was executed quietly, without public spectacle. Hale offered no resistance. Following his arrest, Hale underwent extensive questioning. While he denied all involvement, inconsistencies in his statements deepened suspicion. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office, reviewing the array of accumulated evidence, determined there was sufficient cause to proceed with charges. Though Emily's remains were never recovered, the legal standard permitted prosecutorial action when circumstantial evidence was compelling and cohesive. Throughout the pretrial period, the composite sketch became a focal point in the prosecution's argument. Daniel's work illustrated the power of careful witness synthesis and meticulous pattern identification. The sketch had not solved the case alone, but it had provided a conceptual center point around which the evidence ultimately coalesced. Prosecutors emphasized that without Daniel's interpretation of scattered observations, Hale may have remained outside investigatory focus indefinitely. The trial commenced in early 1984. Expert witnesses outlined the forensic timeline, soil analysis, textile comparisons, and geographic modeling. Investigators testified regarding the discovery of Emily's belongings, the storage unit records, the composite sketch's development, and the behavior Hale exhibited during interviews. The jury listened as prosecutors articulated the investigative steps leading from uncertain beginning to substantiated conclusion. Though Hale's defense argued the evidence was circumstantial and lacked direct proof, the cumulative effect of the investigative details proved persuasive. The jury ultimately found Hale guilty of second-degree murder, concluding that the evidence demonstrated intentional involvement in Emily Larson's disappearance and death. He was sentenced according to Oregon's statutory guidelines, receiving a lengthy term with minimal eligibility for parole. In the months following sentencing, the community reflected on the quiet perseverance that had defined the investigation. Emily's family held a private memorial, placing her personal items, recovered through painstaking search and analysis, in a sealed archive symbolizing closure. Detectives dispersed to new cases, carrying lessons from the investigation forward. The city gradually returned to routine rhythms, though the memory of Emily's disappearance lingered within the department's collective consciousness. For Daniel Whitaker, the case marked a professional milestone. His composite sketch, born from faint recollections and careful scrutiny, had served as the investigative anchor around which the eventual truth assembled. He retained the original sketch within his personal collection, not as a symbol of triumph, but as a reminder of the power of persistence in transforming uncertainty into clarity. Though he continued his work with quiet dedication, this case remained a reference point throughout his career, a testament to the role of patience and attention in resolving what once seemed unsolvable. In the years that followed, the case achieved a quiet legacy within Portland's investigative history. It stood as an example of procedural rigor, interdisciplinary cooperation, and careful forensic evaluation. The resolution did not restore what had been lost, but it provided the certainty the community had sought since that winter evening in 1982. And when new detectives joined the department and studied past cases, they encountered the story of a sketch artist whose commitment to detail helped illuminate the path toward justice, even when the trail had grown cold beneath December rain and the weight of passing years.